Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
Lyra Voss had never expected her life to begin. That was a quiet truth she carried. Unspoken, unquestioned. On Halcyon 3, beginnings weren't dramatic. They weren't marked by destiny or ambition. They were gradual, almost accidental, like the slow turning of soil under a patient sun. Her days followed a rhythm so predictable it bordered on ritual. Wake before the twin dawns. Check irrigation lines. Log nutrient balances. Submit yield reports. Repeat. It wasn't a bad life. It just wasn't anything. Lyra preferred it that way. She was good at disappearing into routine, good at not standing out. In a world where everything depended on balance, weather, crops, ecosystems, being unremarkable was a kind of survival. Still, she had allowed herself one small deviation from the script, the application. It had taken her 3 weeks to complete, mostly because she kept second-guessing whether she should send it at all. The Galactic Bureau of Civil Logistics wasn't prestigious, but it was stable, safe, predictable. A clerical position on some distant station, organizing shipment manifests and supply chains. Perfect. She remembered hovering over the submission button, heart racing for no good reason. "This is stupid," she had muttered. Then she pressed it anyway. After that, life returned to normal, until the letter arrived. It came in a standard data envelope. Nothing unusual. Lyra almost ignored it, assuming it was a routine agricultural update or system notice. She only opened it because the sender code didn't match any of the local networks. She activated the display. A crisp, official insignia unfolded in holographic light. Sharp, angular, unmistakably military. Lyra frowned. That's wrong. She hadn't applied to anything military. The message resolved into text. "Congratulations, candidate Lyra Voss. You have been selected for admission into the Astrix Dominion War Academy." The words seemed to distort as she read them. She blinked, read them again, then again. "No," she said aloud. The room didn't respond. Of course it didn't. Lyra checked the sender authentication. It was valid, triple encrypted, government-level clearance. Her stomach tightened. "Okay," she whispered, forcing calm into her voice. "Administrative error." That made sense. Systems made mistakes. Data got misfiled. Someone with a similar name, maybe. She pulled up her application history. Galactic Bureau of Civil Logistics, submitted, pending review, no mention of anything else. Good. That meant this was fixable. Her first correction request was polite. Subject, admission error. Message, I believe I have been incorrectly assigned to the Astrix Dominion War Academy. I did not apply to this institution. Please review and correct. She sent it and waited. The response came back in under 10 seconds. Request denied. Assignment confirmed. Lyra stared at the screen. That's not how this works. She filed a second request, attaching her application records, identification logs, and a detailed explanation of the discrepancy. This time, the response took longer. 30 seconds. Request denied. Records verified. Report to designated transport within 72 hours. Her pulse quickened. Verified? Verified how? She dug deeper into the system, tried to access the decision logs, but they were locked behind clearance levels far above anything she'd ever seen. That wasn't normal. Even for government systems, there were always traces. Breadcrumbs. This was sealed. Lyra hesitated before submitting the third request. Something about the silence in the system unnerved her. Still, she couldn't just accept this. She typed slowly. Subject, urgent misassignment. Message, there's been a mistake. I am not qualified for military training. Please escalate this to a human reviewer. She hovered over the send command, then pressed it. The reply came instantly. No delay, no processing time, just a single line. Failure to report will be considered treason. Lyra didn't sleep that night. She sat at her workstation, staring at the message as if it might change if she looked at it long enough. Treason. The word felt absurd attached to her. She was a logistics applicant from a farming moon, The most rebellious thing she had ever done was adjust a crop rotation schedule without prior approval. Treason, she repeated softly. It sounded wrong, but the system didn't joke, and it didn't make threats lightly. She opened a public network channel, searching for anything about mistaken academy assignments. There were no results. Not one. That was worse than finding horror stories. That meant it didn't happen, or it wasn't allowed to be recorded. Lyra leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. This isn't real, she said. But it was. Her transport details had already been uploaded. Departure, 72 hours. Location, Orbital Dock 7. Status, mandatory. Her life, her quiet, carefully contained life, had just been overwritten by a line of code she couldn't access. The transport ship was nothing like the cargo vessels she was used to. It was sleek, silent, military, intimidating. Lyra stood at the edge of the boarding ramp, clutching her small bag, packed with the bare essentials of a life she was no longer sure she had. Around her, other candidates gathered. They didn't look like her. They were taller, stronger, sharper. Some wore combat gear. Others bore visible augmentations. Glowing implants beneath their skin, mechanical joints, eyes that flickered with digital overlays. They carried themselves like predators. Lyra felt like prey. One of them glanced at her, frowning. "You lost?" he asked. Lyra opened her mouth, closed it, then said, "I think so." He snorted and walked past her. That was answer enough. She didn't belong here, but the system said she did. And the system, apparently, did not make mistakes. The interior of the ship was cold and minimal. No comfort, no unnecessary design. Just rows of seats and restrained lighting. Lyra took a place near the back. No one spoke to her. Good. She preferred it that way. As the ship lifted off, Halcyon, 3 shrank beneath them, a patchwork of green and gold fading into the darkness of space. Lyra watched it disappear. For the first time in her life, she felt something close to fear. Not the sharp, immediate kind, but a slow, creeping realization. Her life wasn't predictable anymore. It wasn't safe. And whatever waited for her at the Astrix Dominion War Academy, it was designed to break people. Lyra swallowed. Then, almost unconsciously, she straightened in her seat, observed the others, noted their behavior, their posture, their interactions. If she was going to survive this, she needed to understand it. The ship jumped to hyperspace, and Lyra Voss, clerical applicant, officially became something she had never intended to be, a candidate. At the deadliest academy in the galaxy, the asteroid didn't look like a place meant for life. It loomed outside the transport viewport as a jagged mass of black stone, fractured and uneven, slowly rotating against the backdrop of a dying star. The light from that star wasn't warm. It was thin, pale, and unstable, flickering across the surface like something struggling to stay alive. Lyra pressed her fingers lightly against the glass. "That's it," she murmured. No cities, no visible structures, no signs of habitation, just rock and silence. The ship's internal system chimed. Arrival in 30 seconds. Prepare for deployment. Deployment, not landing, not arrival. Lyra felt her stomach tighten. Around her, the other candidates shifted, but not with fear, with anticipation. One of them cracked his knuckles. Another adjusted at a blade mounted along her forearm. A tall figure near the front closed his eyes, breathing slowly, like he was preparing for something sacred. Lyra sat very still. She noticed things. No one asked questions. No one looked confused. That meant one of two things. Either they knew what was coming, or they expected not to be told. The ship jolted slightly as it aligned with the docking structure. A narrow opening carved directly into the asteroid surface. There were no welcoming lights, no guidance systems, just a dark entrance. The ramp dropped. Cold air flooded in. "Move," a mechanical voice ordered. No greeting, no introduction. The candidates didn't hesitate. They filed out quickly, efficiently. Lyra followed. The interior was worse. The corridor they entered was carved from raw stone, uneven and sharp-edged, as if it had been hollowed out by force rather than design. Dim red lights pulsed along the walls, barely illuminating the path ahead. The air smelled metallic. Not rust. Something heavier. Lyra's boots echoed softly against the floor. She adjusted her pace to match the others, not too fast, not too slow. Blend in. That instinct came naturally. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, and that's when Lyra understood. This place wasn't just a school. It was a warning. The chamber was enormous, its ceiling disappearing into darkness. Platforms of varying heights floated in midair, suspended by unseen forces. Between them stretched gaps filled with shadow. Far below, something moved. Not machines. Not entirely. Lyra couldn't quite make out the shapes, only the suggestion of motion, fluid, predatory. A low hum filled the space. Energy, power, danger. The candidates spread out instinctively, taking positions across the main platform. No one spoke. They were waiting for what Lyra didn't know. Then a figure appeared. Not walking, just there. One moment the platform was empty. The next it wasn't. The instructor stood tall, encased in black armor that seemed to absorb the light around it. No visible face. No insignia. Just a presence that pressed down on the room like gravity. When he spoke, his voice didn't come from a single direction. It echoed everywhere. Welcome, candidates. No one moved. No introductions. The voice continued. No orientation briefings. No explanations. A pause. Those who require them will not survive. Lyra felt her pulse quicken. That wasn't dramatic. It was factual. You have been selected, the instructor said, because you meet the minimum threshold for potential. Minimum. From this moment forward, your continued existence will be evaluated. The red lights dimmed. The hum deepened. Phase 1 begins now. The floor vanished. Not cracked. Not collapsed. Gone. Lyra didn't even have time to react properly. 1 second she was standing. The next, she was falling. Her breath tore out of her lungs as gravity seized her. The chamber disappeared above her, replaced by darkness rushing up to meet her. Someone screamed. Then another. Then the sound of bodies hitting water hard. Lyra hit a second later. The impact knocked the air from her chest. Cold swallowed her whole, dragging her down into black. Churning depths. For a moment, she didn't know which way was up. Panic flared. She forced it down. Think. Bubbles. Follow the bubbles. She kicked hard, arms slicing through the water until her head broke the surface. She gasped, pulling in sharp, freezing breaths. Around her, chaos. The chamber had transformed. Or maybe this was always beneath it. A massive, submerged arena stretched out in all directions. Platforms rose and fell unpredictably, shifting positions with mechanical precision. Some were stable. Others tilted or sank without warning. Between them, movement. Lyra froze. Something brushed past her leg. Fast. Too fast. Get out of the water, someone shouted. A candidate nearer tried to climb onto a platform, only for someone below to surge upward, dragging him back down with a violent splash. The water turned dark. Lyra didn't look. Didn't need to. Her body already understood. This wasn't a test of strength. It was a test of decisions. She scanned the environment. Quickly. Not frantically. Quickly. The platforms followed a pattern. Subtle, but there. 3 rose while 2 sank. Then the sequence reversed. A cycle. The creatures. Reactive. They attacked movement. Erratic movement. Especially, the candidates who thrashed were targeted first. Those who panicked. Disappeared. Lyra slowed her breathing. Forced her limbs to still. Don't look like prey. A platform drifted closer. Not the nearest one. The right one. It would stabilize in approximately 5 seconds. She counted. 1, 2, 3. Now. Lyra moved. Not explosively. Not desperately. Smooth. Controlled. She swam in a straight line, minimizing splash, minimizing disturbance. Something shifted beneath her, but it didn't strike. She reached the platform just as it leveled out, pulled herself up, rolled onto solid ground, didn't stand immediately, stayed low, invisible. Around her, the others fought. Some used weapons, hidden blades, energy bursts, Brute force. They carved paths through the chaos, climbing, leaping, attacking. They were strong, but they were loud, predictable. Lyra watched every movement, every mistake. A group of 3 formed an alliance. Temporary, tense. They moved together, covering each other, fighting off threats. Efficient, until one slipped. The others hesitated. That was enough. All 3 were gone within seconds. Lyra exhaled slowly. No alliances. Not here. Not like this. A tone echoed through the chamber. 5 minutes remaining. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Remaining for what? Survival? Selection? She didn't need the answer. She just needed to last. She shifted slightly, tracking the movement of platforms ahead. There was a corridor forming, not intentionally, but as a byproduct of the system's pattern. A path. Temporary. Narrow. If she timed it right, she moved again. Platform to platform. Not the shortest route. The safest. Behind her, the chaos intensified. Fewer candidates now. More aggression. Desperation creeping in. Good. Desperation made people predictable. Lyra reached the final platform just as the system shifted again. Ahead, a narrow opening. An exit. She slipped through it. The moment she crossed the threshold, everything stopped. The noise, the movement, the danger. Gone. She stumbled into a quiet chamber, breathing hard, clothes soaked, heart hammering. Others were already there. Not many. She counted. 12. Out of dozens. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The absence of the others said enough. A moment later, the instructor appeared again. Same as before. Silent. Immovable. Phase 1 complete. His gaze moved across them. Not randomly. Deliberately. Analyzing. When it reached Lyra, it paused. Just for a fraction of a second. But she noticed. You demonstrated instinct, he said. Adaptation. Restraint. A beat. Most of you relied on force. Another beat. They are no longer here. The implication hung in the air. Lyra swallowed. She hadn't fought. Not once. And yet, she had survived. The instructor turned slightly. Proceed to the next stage. The doors opened. No congratulations. No relief. Just continuation. As the remaining candidates moved forward, Lyra hesitated for the briefest moment. Then she followed. Because now she understood something important. This place didn't reward strength. It didn't reward bravery. It rewarded correct decisions. And for the first time since the letter arrived, Lyra Voss realized she might not be in the wrong place after all. By the 3rd cycle, everyone knew her. Not by name, not at first, but by absence. Where is she? That was the question that kept coming up. During combat drills, she wasn't in the center, not on the front lines, not even at the edges. She was somewhere else, watching, calculating, avoiding, and surviving. The academy did not operate on days. There were no mornings, no nights, no rest period announced by gentle tones or soft lights. Time was measured in cycles, training sequences that bled into one another without warning. Fatigue wasn't managed. It was weaponized. The second phase began less than an hour after phase 1 ended. No recovery, no explanation, just a new environment. The simulation chamber this time resembled a war-torn city. If resembled, could even describe it. Buildings leaned at impossible angles. Streets fractured into vertical drops. Smoke filled the air, thick and disorienting. Lyra stood near the edge of a collapsed structure, taking it in. Around her, the remaining candidates were already moving. Of course they were. The ones who hesitated. Didn't last. A sharp tone cut through the air. Objective. Secure and hold a command point. A holographic map flickered into existence above them, highlighting multiple locations. Too many, deliberately so. Multiple objectives means conflict, someone muttered. Or a trap, another replied. Lyra didn't move. Not yet. She watched. Within seconds, the candidates split into factions, some charging toward the nearest command points, others targeting high ground, a few attempting to flank. Predictable. Very predictable. Lyra studied the map again, then the environment, then the people. The nearest command point was already contested. Too obvious. The farthest one. Too isolated. That left the one no one wanted. A half-collapsed relay station buried between unstable structures. Difficult to reach. Difficult to hold. Which made it valuable. Lyra moved, not with urgency, with intention. She took a longer route, avoiding open streets and obvious paths. She moved through debris, shadow, broken corridors, places others ignored because they were inconvenient. Twice, she heard fighting nearby. She didn't investigate. She didn't need to. By the time she reached the relay station, it was empty. Of course it was. No one wanted the difficult objective. Lyra stepped inside. The structure creaked around her, unstable but intact enough to function. A control console flickered weakly in the center of the room. She approached it carefully, activated it. The system responded. Command point secured. A quiet confirmation. No fanfare. No announcement. Good. Lyra exhaled slowly. Now came the hard part. Holding it. They came within minutes. Not one group. 3. All at once. Lyra didn't panic. She expected this. The moment the easier objectives fell, the remaining candidates would converge on the last viable point. Hers. She moved quickly, not to fight, but to prepare. She scanned the structure. Weak points. Structural stress lines. Unstable supports. Then she made a decision. Not to defend the relay. To reshape it. The first group entered aggressively. 2 candidates moving in formation, weapons drawn. Clear it, one said. They expected resistance. They expected a fight. What they didn't expect was nothing. The room was empty. The console active. No sign of Lyra. Where is she? One of them muttered. The floor shifted. Just slightly. A warning. Too late. The support beam Lyra had destabilized gave way, sending part of the ceiling crashing down between them. The structure didn't collapse entirely, just enough to separate them, disorient them, confuse them. Lyra watched from above. She hadn't left. She had moved up. The second group arrived seconds later, colliding with the chaos of the first. Miscommunication, misdirection, assumptions. They thought they were under attack. From each other. Lyra didn't correct them. She let it happen. By the time the third group arrived, the relay station was a controlled disaster. No clear lines of sight. No stable footing. No certainty. Exactly what she needed. She slipped through the upper levels, adjusting small variables, triggering minor collapses, redirecting movement, isolating individuals without ever engaging directly. She never struck, never revealed herself. But she was there, everywhere. The fighting below intensified. Candidates turned on each other, convinced they were being outmaneuvered by unseen opponents. They weren't wrong, just not in the way they thought. The tone sounded again. Objective complete. Silence fell. The simulation froze. The remaining candidates, fewer now, stood scattered among the ruins, breathing hard, weapons drawn. Lyra climbed down from the upper structure, stepping lightly onto the fractured floor. This time they saw her. One of them frowned. You, he said. You didn't fight. Lyra tilted her head slightly. I did. No, you. He stopped because he understood. Not fully, but enough. You made us fight each other. Lyra didn't answer. She didn't need to. The chamber dissolved. Reality reasserted itself. The instructor stood before them again. Commander Dragon. This time, his presence felt focused, intentional. You relied on strength, he said, looking at the others. Then his gaze shifted. You relied on structure. It settled on Lyra. A pause. You altered it. Lyra met his gaze. Calm, neutral. You didn't give us rules, she said. Dragon's helmet tilted slightly. Correct. So I used what was there. A longer pause. Then, atypical, he said. Not praise, not criticism, just a fact. From that point on, the others stopped ignoring her. They started watching. Closely, and not with curiosity. With caution. She's not normal, one whispered during a later cycle. She's not enhanced, another replied. I checked. Then how? They didn't finish the question. Because they didn't have an answer. Lyra noticed a shift. Of course she did. It didn't bother her. If anything, it made things easier. People who were wary made mistakes. The psychological evaluations came next, a stark contrast to the physical trials. Or so it seemed. Lyra sat in a sterile chamber, alone, facing a blank wall. A voice spoke, neutral, artificial, candidate Lyra Voss. Yes. State your ambition. Lyra paused, considered, then answered honestly. I don't have one. Silence. Then, response invalid. Lyra frowned slightly. Then define ambition. A pause. Longer this time. Clarify response. I don't want power, or recognition, or control, she said. I want to continue existing. Silence. Then, accepted. Lyra blinked. That wasn't what she expected. The questions continued. Primary motivation? Survival. Secondary motivation? Efficiency. Tertiary motivation? Lyra thought for a moment, minimizing unnecessary risk. Another pause. Longer. Then, profile deviation detected. Is that a problem? Lyra asked. No answer. The system moved on. When she left the chamber, Commander Dragon was waiting, not by accident. He stood near the exit, silent, as the other candidates passed. Some avoided looking at him. Others straightened instinctively, as if under inspection. Lyra didn't change her pace, didn't look away, didn't look for approval. She simply walked. Lyra Voss. She stopped, turned. Yes. Dragon studied her, not like an instructor, like a problem. You don't engage unless necessary, he said. No, you don't pursue dominance. No, you don't compete. Lyra considered that. Then, I survive. A pause. That won't be enough here. His tone wasn't dismissive. It was testing. Lyra held his gaze. It already has been. Silence stretched between them. Heavy, measured. Then, for the first time, Dragon smiled. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. But it was there. Continue, he said. Lyra nodded once, then walked past him. As she rejoined the others, she felt again that shift. The Academy hadn't rejected her. It hadn't corrected the error. It was watching her, adjusting to her, testing her differently now. Lyra didn't know why, but she understood one thing with absolute clarity. She was no longer just surviving by accident. She was surviving because she was, in her own way, exactly what this place needed. And that was far more dangerous than not belonging at all. By the time the final phase was announced, there were only 6 of them left, 6 out of dozens. 6 candidates who had endured the Academy's shifting environments, its calculated brutality, its refusal to explain anything. 6 who had adapted, each in their own way. They did not stand together. They stood apart. Distance had become instinct. Trust had long since been erased. Lyra observed them quietly. There was Kao, the aggressive one, all for momentum and overwhelming force. He had survived by breaking through everything in his path. Virex, precise, augmented, with eyes that tracked more than just movement. He processed information faster than anyone else. Terran and Soul, temporary allies who had somehow remained intact through every phase, their coordination almost seamless. Naira, silent, unreadable, a shadow even among predators. And then, Lyra, the one who didn't fit, the one who wasn't supposed to be there. They were gathered in a circular chamber this time. No simulation, no illusions, just raw stone and a single, elevated platform. Commander Dragon stood above them. This is a final assessment. No one reacted. They had learned better. You will be deployed to a live environment, he continued. No restrictions. No oversight beyond observation. A pause. Then, one candidate will graduate. Silence deepened. The meaning was clear. They had expected it. But expectation did not lessen the weight of it. Eliminate your cohort, Dragon said. No hesitation. No embellishment. Or be eliminated. The deployment was immediate. No time to prepare. No time to plan. The chamber dissolved into light. And then, Impact. Lyra hit the ground hard, rolling instinctively to absorb the force. Dust filled the air around her, fine and dry, clinging to her skin. She stayed down, still, listening. No immediate movement nearby. Good. Slowly, she pushed herself up and took in her surroundings. A broken world. The moon was fractured. Its surface split into jagged plates of rock, separated by deep fissures that glowed faintly with unstable energy. Structures, ancient, metallic, rose from the terrain at odd angles, half buried, half destroyed. Wind howled across the surface, carrying ash and static. Unstable. Hostile. Perfect. Lyra exhaled slowly. This wasn't just a battlefield. It was a system, and systems could be understood. She didn't move immediately. That would be a mistake. Instead, she crouched low and began observing. The sky, drones. There, small, fast-moving, patrolling in irregular patterns. But not random. Nothing here was random. She tracked one, then another, overlaying their paths in her mind. A network, surveillance, possibly offensive. She smiled faintly. Good. Hours passed. Or maybe less. Time didn't matter here. Lyra moved carefully through the terrain, avoiding open spaces, staying within the cover of ruins and fractured rock. She ignored weapons caches when she found them. Too obvious. Too expected. Instead, she searched for infrastructure, control points, relays, anything that suggested authority. She found it near the center of the fractured zone, a structure partially buried beneath collapsed metal plating. Its surface was scarred, but intact enough to function. A command relay, not primary, but connected. Lyra knelt beside it, brushing away debris. "Let's see what you do," she murmured. The interface flickered weakly as she activated it. Access denied. Of course. She adjusted her approach. Not force. Redirection. She traced the system's pathways, identifying redundancies, bypass loops, fallback protocols. Every system had them. This one was no different. It just hid them better. It took time, precision, patience, but eventually the interface responded. Access granted. Lyra exhaled softly. Thank you. The first explosion echoed in the distance. She didn't flinch. She expected it. The others had already begun. Kale, most likely. He wouldn't wait. He would hunt. Directly. Aggressively. Predictably. Lyra continued working. She didn't take control of the system. Not entirely. That would be too obvious. Too detectable. Instead, she made small changes. Subtle ones. Drone targeting parameters. Adjusted. Priority systems. Shifted. Supply drop coordinates. Redirected. Nothing drastic. Nothing immediate. But over time, the system would begin to favor her and disfavor everyone else. By the time the others realized something was wrong, it was already happening. Kale was the first to fall. Not to Lyra, to the drones. He had engaged two candidates simultaneously, overwhelming them with sheer force. But the noise, the movement, the aggression, it triggered the system. Drones converged. Not randomly. Precisely. He fought them. Of course he did. And for a moment, it looked like he might win. Then the targeting shifted. Just slightly. Enough. Kale disappeared in a storm of energy fire. Terran and Soul lasted longer. They adapted. They always had. But their strength, their coordination relied on stability, on predictability. Lyra removed both. Supply drops meant for them vanished. Paths they relied on collapsed. Signals they used to track each other scrambled. They didn't realize they were being separated until it was too late. Alone, they were still strong. But not enough, Virex noticed. Of course he did. His enhancements allowed him to see patterns others couldn't. He stopped moving, started analyzing. Something's wrong, he said aloud, though no one was there to hear him. He traced the drone behavior, the system fluctuations, the inconsistencies, and slowly he understood. Someone is controlling this. Not entirely, but enough. His eyes lifted toward the horizon. Lyra. That was when Lyra finally moved. Not to hide, but to finish. Naira found her first. silent as ever, emerging from the shadows of a fractured structure, blade already drawn. "You," Naira said quietly. Lyra didn't turn immediately. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Naira's grip tightened slightly. "You've been manipulating the field." "Yes." "Why not fight?" Lyra turned then, meeting her gaze. "This is fighting." A pause. Naira studied her. Then, for the first time, she hesitated. That was enough. The drone shifted, not aggressively, not obviously, just enough to change the balance. Naira moved, but the terrain beneath her gave way. A controlled collapse. Not fatal, just decisive. She fell into the fissure below. Gone. Virex was last. He didn't attack. He approached. Carefully. "You altered the system," he said. "Yes." "You didn't eliminate us." "No. You made the environment do it." Lyra nodded. Virex studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Efficient." A pause. "Predictable, though." Lyra tilted her head slightly. "Is it?" The drones appeared behind him. Not suddenly. Gradually. He had seen them. Of course he had. But he hadn't accounted for when they would engage. Timing. That was a variable. And Lyra controlled it. Virex exhaled. "Good strategy," he said. Then he moved. Fast. Precise. But not fast enough. Silence returned. The battlefield stilled. No more movement. No more conflict. Just wind. And the distant hum of systems returning to neutral. Lyra stood alone. The sky flickered. A message burned across it in sharp, white light. Final candidate, Lyra Voss. Extraction arrived minutes later. A transport descended to the fractured sky, landing with controlled precision. The ramp lowered. Commander Dragan stood at the top, waiting. Lyra approached, not hurried, not hesitant, just steady. She stepped onto the ramp, stopped in front of him. "You didn't win," he said. Lyra raised an eyebrow slightly. "No, you didn't defeat them." She considered that. Then, "They're gone." Dragan's helmet tilted. "You rewrote the rules." Lyra shrugged faintly. "They weren't efficient." A pause. Longer this time. Then, "Do you know why your administrative error was never corrected?" Something in his tone shifted. Subtle, but real. Lyra felt it. A tightening in her chest. "No." Dragan stepped closer. "It wasn't an error." Silence. The words settled slowly. Carefully. "You were selected," he continued, "not for what you are. A beat, but for what you aren't." Lyra frowned slightly. "I don't understand." "You lack ambition," he said. "You lack ego. You lack the need to prove anything." Another step closer. "That makes you invisible to systems designed to test those traits." Lyra's mind moved quickly, connecting, reframing. "You built a system that filters out people like me," she said. "Yes." "And then you needed someone who could bypass it." Dragan nodded once. "Exactly." Lyra looked back at the battlefield, at the fractured world, at the silent aftermath of everything that had happened. All of it designed, calculated, and she had moved through it, not by force, not by dominance, but by understanding, by not being what the system expected. Slowly, she smiled. "Then your system works." Dragan shook his head, a small movement, but definite. "No," he said. His voice was quieter now, almost certain. "You do." The ramp closed. The ship lifted. And for the first time since the letter arrived, Lyra Voss didn't feel like she had been misplaced. She felt like she had been found.